The importance about culture, there's a lot of research that shows that culture precedes positive results in terms of business performance, in terms of being more open to innovation, more open to change, and of course, retaining talent or attracting great talent. Welcome, so excited to be here. So thank you for joining me. The most important thing about culture, that culture is a never-ending problem. Like innovation, the moment you solve an innovation problem, something else happens. So as a consequence of maybe you solve for speed, but then what about consumption? So it's always something that gets to be solved in the next time. So culture is not something that you move your company or your team from point A to point B and that's it, check. It's something that you're working constantly. So we're going to talk about a culture, not as a definition, but understanding culture as a system. So it's the result of lots of elements that we need to understand, like how they operate all together. And at some point, we're going to have to zoom in into each of them, but also make sure that we don't lose the forest when we're focusing on the tree. One of the reasons leaders basically want people to go back fully to the office is that they feel, hey, we're missing this impromptu conversation, what here they call the water cooler conversations, people getting around by chance, and then whap, innovation, creativity, improvement, lots of magical things are going to happen. There's no single piece of research that shows that the water cooler conversations are actually good. On the contrary, if there's some things that these conversations are actually exclusive, not inclusive, they're about a few people, the meeting after the meeting, the people gossiping or criticizing or talking about the people that are not there. No? So actually many times this magical moment is not only not magical, but actually it's harmful. You mentioned that culture is the way we do things here. I think it's a connection of three elements: the way we feel, the way we think, and the way we act. And they're all interconnected. As many of you are experts on emotional culture, you know that emotions play a key role into how we operate, but also how we think. People start saying, hey, no, you cannot design culture. You cannot design culture. It's organic. It's organic. I think that people confuse the word design with control. Design doesn't mean that you can define how everything's going to happen, that you cannot control the outcome, but at least you can set some rules so people can work in that environment. So there are three elements that I want to connect, which is how can we think of culture as something that we co-design, something that we co-create, and something that can be co-owned. So the process of design, it's about inviting people to the table. So if you care about the company values and you're refreshing your company values, well, you need to understand what really drives people. What are the inflators of that culture and what deflates that culture? If you don't get those people input, then the values are going to be great for you as a leader, but are going to be meaningful and irrelevant for others. It's also co-created because, as I mentioned before, you provide certain rules, you provide the building blocks, but then people, through their actions, through their decisions, through their interaction with others, are going to create that culture, not just the way leaders behave or the way leaders model behavior, but also how people also show up. And last but not least, when people were part of the defining the culture they want to live in, the environment they want to live in, you don't need to sell them that culture as a leader. They feel that they were part, they own it. The framework that we use, and going back, this is kind of the forest, the system that we use is called the Culture Design Canvas for those who are not familiar. And basically these 10 building blocks or elements are what for us define through research the culture of any team or any organization. At the core, it's the foundational part of culture in which we want to align people around. So basically we're talking about things that are more like the long-term decisions, the long-term vision for the culture of the company. It's the purpose. Why do we exist? What are our values? What are the priorities that we have? And most importantly, how these values connect to behaviors in terms of what types of things do we reward and what types of things do we punish. On the right side, psychological safety, feedback, and rituals are the key elements that basically help us create that sense of belonging. How we feel, how we connect, how we feel accepted and part of that organization or team. And last but not least, on the left side, elements that for us are critical when it comes to culture that define the level of agility, how we adapt, speed. The functionality of culture happens when how we make decisions, what are the norms and rules that shape the expected behavior, and then how do we meet, how do we collaborate, not just the meetings, but also how we collaborate asynchronously, not when we're in a call or in person. Rituals are a very powerful tool that help enable identity, that help transform our behavior, but also bring connection. So rituals are basically transformation, like a rite of passage in which I start in one state and I finish in another. But the most important part is what we call the liminality, that moment in which I separate from my previous state. I'm in that limbo. I know one thing, not the other, and then I'm going to incorporate into a new state of mind. You know that the All Blacks are famous because they practice the haka, this ritual inspired of Maori culture at the beginning of any match to intimidate the rivals. What very few people know that the All Blacks also practice another ritual behind closed doors, and they clean their visitors or guests a locker room. And why do we do that? They do that because one of their values is about humility. Yeah, they have won over 78% of all the test matches across history. So one of the most, if not the most successful sports team, not just rugby team on earth. Still, their coach wants to remind them, hey, we need to stay humble, we need to stay learning, we stay connected. So what's the practice these rituals? So rituals connect to behavior.